cheese and stuff, or?
You kind of think it's just a
Number one fan.
market, which like if you offer a good class,
Fabric.
students will find it.
No, I usually
Because
go
students
trying
are
to
very
make that
direct
I'm up to class before I go to.
Yeah, and if something doesn't count,
In a good way. Get rid of it in a good way. Okay, are you ready?
and the
just
DAR,
checking to
so
see
I
if
mean,
Jay
I think,
emailed
I
us.
just think that any class that
Jason,
doesn't
there
have
he
it.
is. Hi, Jason.
I was literally just going, maybe he's running late.
So,
So anyway, the reason I asked.
I'll just be like, I need to.
That's fine.
Just let you know what could happen.
So we won't run after you thinking you're having a seizure. I think he's dying, guys.
I'm sure sooner or later I'll know, even if I don't know.
You were at housing.
Yeah, that's what it was.
I know.
No, I'm just gonna bring it up.
Thanks.
Well, there was
All right, we're gonna get this party started. It is actually 7:01 Eastern Standard Time. We're back to not wrong time. So I will call to order the Planning Commission meeting for November 12th, 2024. This is not a work session. So if anybody saw that, this is a traditional standard meeting. With that, we'll accept an approval of the agenda.
I move approval of the agenda.
Dr. Berthridge with the
Second.
motion. Vice Chair Rosenberg with the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Seeing none, it's approved. Approval of the minutes from August 13, 2024. Do I have a
Motion to approve?
Dr. Berthridge with the motion.
Second.
All right, Mr. Kruth with the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposition? Seeing none, motion passes and the the minutes are approved. All right, at this time, we'll entertain public comments from folks who are in attendance for items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if any of the 4 public participants wants to mosey up to the podium, feel free. Otherwise, we'll keep rolling. Seeing 4 smiles and no movement, we will move on to reports from commissions, boards, committees, and staff. Mr. Kruth, you drew the short straw. You get to go first.
Nothing to report.
Easy peasy. Ms. Webster.
nothing to report.
This is getting easy.
I unfortunately was not in attendance, Housing Advisory Commission, but Counselor Bracken was.
And seeing as you're the next victim, person?
Yeah, so at Housing Advisory Commission, we talked about the cottage community and how we might not be moving forward with that because they weren't able to meet some of the things that we thought were very important. So we might potentially go back to requests for proposals and reconsider, which wouldn't eliminate them, but then there might be more competition options going forward.
So just to clarify, the concept is still alive and well in
Yes.
Oxford. It's just the facilitation with this vendor.
Yes,
Okay.
the things we wanted in terms of the cost for those who might be staying there, in terms of having social services and people on site, didn't quite meet everything that we wanted out of that, so we wanted to make sure because we have an obligation to the community to get the best out of that, especially since the city of Oxford is donating a lot of money and resources to that. So that's where we stand. That was the biggest news.
Okay.
Could you just clarify the address of this, which one you're talking about?
That's the one on Hester Road, right?
Yeah, the one
Okay,
adjacent
got it.
to the hotel.
And then I can speak to Environmental Commission, except it was canceled, so nothing there.
Look at that. You get to pinch hit and you
Yeah.
got out of one. Dr. Berthridge?
So, I don't know whether to defer on Mr. Arbuckle. We did, I don't remember if we met in October as Planning Commission, but we did have a Parking and Transportation Advisory Board in October to help with route planning for the Oxford Area Trail for the Northwestern Arc. As you know, that there had been we had tried this back in 2021 and encountered some landowner opposition and kind of put a pin in it. I would say that what we did is we approached it in a different kind of way this time. Partly what it was I would say that the groundwork done by staff Mr. Moore and Mr. Perry, along with Etta Reed, Bayer Becker, to prepare this like really beautiful story map that it was just kind of like as someone who teaches urban planning, it was just like such the way urban planning in theory would be done all the time. It was very highly communicative. It was a really easy format to understand what the options were, that there was more than one option, and the options were each kind of like generally labeled in terms of like different variabilities, like variables, whether they were more or less feasible, practical, whether they were more costly, what their user experience would be, so that people could make an intelligent choice. Sometimes with some of these things we talk about, like trails or affordable housing, it's kind of like they like it in theory, but they like it somewhere over there. But when you start weighing the pros and cons of what over there means, well, that's in the township, it's infeasible. So it was ultimately what it did is it fostered a very intelligent and rational conversation. In part, the way the meeting was choreographed by Assistant Manager Jessica Green and Carla Blackmar as the chair and staff and Netta Reed. And so ultimately, we kind of, the Parking and Transportation Advisory Board recommended a set of options that were more in town because they're actually within the city's domain and control. Like you can say, oh, it'd be really nice if we're out in the township, but the city has very little ability to make that trail happen. So if we actually want a trail to happen. So I guess I would just say that it was really an awesome way, and if you haven't viewed it already, the story map was really like a beautiful thing in terms of both the content and the way it facilitated the conversation. So that was really, really good, and Mr. Arbuckle can shed any other additional light on that. I can't remember the last time we met, but again, I think that one of the things, just for those of you that we moved forward a recommendation on regulations for short-term rentals, Airbnb, that, as you recall, focused at that time specifically on the non-mile square districts. But I know that there was some kind of disquiet on the commission, like, well, what about, like, are we really not going to regulate the mile square? So what the council did was move forward with extending a moratorium on short-term rentals, not on the other areas, because now we have good regulations in place, but to give us a little bit more time to figure out what we want to do in the mile square. So Mr. Perry can kind of update on where. And then I could talk about some developments that have been discussed on the campus that could impact the town, but I'll defer to that since we don't know very much yet. But there have been some proposals on campus that have bearing off campus in terms of the intensity of the use of parking and circulation. We've heard some proposals that in hypothetically could touch upon historic districts. So to be determined on this, we're just trying to, on the city side, we're trying to learn more about what exactly is happening and what it means for the city of Oxford and what role the city of Oxford might play in shaping developments that may be on campus but may have impacts to the city of Oxford.
And I know you're on top of this, but I would emphatically encourage the city to have an equitable seat at the table, because I know historically there's been a climate of, well, let's not ask them. Well, we can't do anything, and I don't think this is one of those that will go over well in any respect if there's not collaboration.
Well, and so I think partly we're just trying to find out the facts about what is actually being proposed and where it is in the decision-making process. But also, like, I kind of inquired and got a folder full of legal opinions from the past about to what degree does a university have to make a good faith effort to comply with things like historic districts that are, or zoning or other sorts of things. So I think there may be conversations in the future about these sorts of things. Perfect.
Mr. Arbuckle, do you have anything for the greater good?
And so David did a great job of discussing the transportation forum that we had. I will say that the public comment was very robust and provided great information for staff to kind of refine and select the route. So I thought it was very positive, and I think there's a way forward from this to actually to create something.
Perfect. Historic architecture is tomorrow, and I won't be able to attend, but it was mostly administrative approvals and some discussion items, including a cannon in Uptown Park and just an update on some of the work that was done with the consultants, which is a beautiful dovetail to Mr. Perry.
Thank you. Yeah, the uptown restroom design is coming along, so we're going to be discussing that a little bit tomorrow night with HAPC. And to continue the comments that Commissioners Prithridge and Arbuckle made on the Parking and Transportation Advisory Board regarding the alignment recommendation for council to consider, the date that we're penciling for that would be December 17th for the council agenda, which would be taking the Parking and Transportation Advisory Board's recommendation for council consideration, so that we could then have that plan, if council decides to adopt that, on the books for at whatever point the rest of the trail sections are funded, then the alignment for those would be kind of refined to the point that it would help for grant applications. So I'd be glad to move that along. And then I also wanted to let everyone know that our big code rewrite project and historic preservation plan and design guidelines is moving along. We had our first big public meeting on October 24th, kind of town hall style. It was pretty well attended. And there was some surveying that was done. So the consultants were here for a couple days. Staff spent a lot of time with them out in the field, and some of you folks did as well. Thank you. Corey and Dana Miller, also from HAPC, spent a lot of time with our consultants. We did some walking tours, some driving tours, and then those that attended the town hall on that Thursday evening, there was able to be some kind of live surveying, and all of that will fold in to some analysis that the consultants will be doing. McKenna Associates and Preservation Forward are the two consultant names. So that website, for anyone who's interested in checking it out, is cityofoxford.org/Oxford Today.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll take you to the consultant's website, where you can fill out a quite lengthy survey about like housing preferences and architectural styles, that kind of thing. But there's going to be a lot more to it than just the form and massing of buildings. It's about other things as well. So it's subdivision and zoning, historic preservation is all being redrafted. So, and then there'll be we had talked about a meeting date of January 16th, but we're just saying January right now. So for the next public meeting of kind of updating on what we think we heard so far. So it'd be about a year-long process. So we're hoping to be done by 2025 with a complete code update. So.
Perfect. Anything?
So
know-
I just,
I know two of us were there for quite a
Yeah,
bit,
so there's just a kind of question, and I know that there's a method to what you're thinking, so the planning commission, I think it was a public meeting, and the invitation to was not extended specifically to the planning commission. So some of us were there, but other of us were not. So how do you, and there's probably a procedural reason why you might do that. And so I guess I'm questioning, like, assuming that there's a certain amount of expertise on the planning commission. So when do we imagine that being able to help, involved in the process? I know you're on the committee. There's kind of a core committee. So I guess if you're on the planning commission and this is going on, when can planning commissioners kind of anticipate having a role in seeing where things are and initial feedback and GIS? So what are the kind of the steps for that?
I would think it'd be in first quarter after January. Would you think, Zach? Yeah.
So kind of like a work session update or something?
We could do it that way. There's a variety of ways. We'll work with Mr. Watt on what format he thinks would be good, and what would be helpful for the consultant. There's limited times that they're here. We can also do some things just staff only. That could be possible. We could possibly do something virtual. But kind of the main reason for having it kind of narrow at the beginning is to kind of streamline the process to get it to the point where there can be a reaction to something, because right now it's still very, very broad. There's nothing to react to yet for commission members. So it would be in the first quarter after that January meeting with the general public.
But for example, that the public input that we're council commission members are members of the public, and so are they invited to contribute
Oh,
their
absolutely.
thoughts? I mean, and we all have
Yeah.
like experience with the code, so I guess
Yeah.
the question is is our role going to be kind of adjudicative at the end, or will it be formative and generative at the beginning?
Well, I think kind of even beyond our staff here, city staff and leadership, we have the comprehensive plan as a guiding tool. That's been really leaned into. But I think also, and not to put words in Mr. Perry's mouth, I spent a good amount of time with the folks. It was great because I don't think we got to the point where it was, here's what we think you should do, or here. It was cliche, a listening tour. They were very asking a lot of questions. In fact, I remember at one point I think it was Withrow or Vine, we were walking in a house that I personally, I knew it was old, and well, it's this kind of da-da-da-da-da, what, and they were asking questions about the stories, had the opportunity to take them into Red Life and show them that. So it was really, there were maybe offhand like, oh, what about this, or have you heard this? But I was really impressed with basically the sponge vibe I got from the consultants. At this point, I mean, they're really just trying to take in our town, showed them the Beehive Alley and some of those things, so.
Yeah, I guess I feel like the commission is our kind of key stakeholders. I know ultimately we will be voting on this stuff at the end, and we probably need to maintain a certain independence, and probably you don't want to have too many of us in a room. But
Can't have more than 3.
But I do just, like, I hope that, I do feel like people have a pretty deep stake in the outcome and have thoughts, whether it's just at a listening store level. So, I mean, I've made this point before, and I hope that we afford the commission good opportunities to participate. So I look forward to hearing what those are.
Mr. Perry? Or Mr. Moore? Sorry, I was looking at you and.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. You actually covered everything that was on my notes, so I
See?
have nothing further to add.
It was prophetic. All right. So moving on, new business. PC 2024-13, 110 South Locust, conditional use for an entertainment facility. Mr. Webb is the architect, applicant, and / agent. So.
I mean, a motion for public hearing?
Could I get there?
Yeah, okay.
I'll accept a motion to adjourn to public hearing.
I was going to offer one before, but now I'm not going to.
That's fine.
I would move we enter into public hearing on PC 2024-13.
A second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, seeing no opposition, we will adjourn to the public. And Mr. Moore, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a conditional use that is proposed at 110 South Locust Street. This is for an entertainment facility. There we go. The applicant is Scott Webb Architect. The property owner is Locust Property Group LLC under the care of Nathan Chamberlain. The business owner, who is with us tonight, is Mr. Jesse Baker. The zoning classification on the property is GB General Business District. The site area, it's a little above a half an acre in size, 25,478 square feet to be exact. And the proposal, again, it's a conditional use to establish a new entertainment facility, and this would include escape rooms and an indoor putt-putt course. Here is a look at the site location along Locust Street. So this is just south of El Burrito Loco, to the west of the Locust Wash Center, as well as to the north of the Oxford Donut Shop and the former Walgreens. Here's a look at the zoning in the area. So it's pretty much a sea of red, GB General Business Zoning District. And then here is an aerial view. So as you can see, there's already some off-street parking that's provided on site, taking up roughly half of the site. And then here is a look at the front of the structure, which faces south. And there are up to 5 tenant spaces within this building. They're addressed as units A through E. So unit E, I believe, is the one in the rear, which already has a tenant. But the proposal would be for the middle unit, so B through D. And then here's another look at the parking area. You can see the dumpster down at the end. And within the staff report, one of the recommendations, in fact, more than a recommendation, it's a code requirement when you change the use. You have to come into conformance with the current standards, which would include a refuse enclosure. So that would be going at the end of the parking lot. And here is a look from the front. So there's an existing ground sign. There's a for sale sign there as well. And then here's the floor plan, and I am aware that the applicant will go into much greater depth on this, so I won't focus too heavily on this, but essentially the putt-putt is toward the back of the building, so in this area here, and then the escape rooms would be up closer to Locust Street. And then there's a private party room in the center. So here we are at the recommendation. This is a quick one. We are recommending approval of the application, subject to 3 conditions. The first condition is simply acknowledging another requirement of the zoning code, which is to have a walkway constructed between the building/use to the public sidewalk. So in this case, there is existing public sidewalk along South Locust, so we would ask that that be connected over, which shouldn't be too terribly difficult. There's already walkway in front of those storefronts, so essentially just extending it a little bit further to the east to meet up with the sidewalk. Number 2, I already mentioned, the refuse enclosure meeting city standards and specifications. And then the third condition is actually a suggested waiver to code. This is out of our signage chapter 1151.03E4. And what this provision entails is essentially, so there's normally a roof sign prohibition that is citywide. And as you could estimate, just judging by the photos, there's really not a lot of surface area on the facade of the building on which to place a wall sign that meets our code definition, which is within 16 inches of the building wall. In fact, there's already a non-conforming roof sign that is located above the storefront closest to Locust. And there's also, I believe there's some, go back here. There's already some roof signs, grandfathered roof signs on top of the very similar commercial structure to the south where the Oxford Donut Shop is located. So we would actually recommend that for this particular building, given its architectural style, with this hip roof that's pretty low, situated fairly low to those storefronts, that we would essentially acknowledge a waiver to this requirement, or I should say prohibition against roof signs, contingent on 3 things being met. So positioned no greater than 3 feet above the roof line, so not sticking it all the way up at the very top of the roof pitch. Being no greater than 3 feet in height, that's pretty standard across all of our wall signs. And then being no greater than 30 square feet in size. So that would essentially be like a 10 by 3 roof sign. So just to give it a restriction, a reasonable restriction in terms of the size that could result. And so this would be 1 roof sign per tenant. So that is the staff recommendation. I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
You know I have questions, but I'll go last. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Moore?
Just real quick question. I noticed that, I guess I didn't realize, in addition to the roof-mounted sign, there's like roof-mounted lighting. And I don't know whether our code, like, does our code bear at all on this as a conditional use? I mean, is that compliant with our current code, or?
Yeah, I believe there is a floodlight that is currently on top of the structure. And I don't think our code gets all that detailed in terms of, like, it doesn't specify particular forms of lighting. You can have wall pack lighting, you can have
Okay.
lamppost lighting. Whenever you have a new use that's establishing, there's lighting requirements, so it's a minimum of 1 foot candle that has to be across the entire parking area. So that hasn't really been evaluated with this. Those standards aren't really becoming applicable because the parking area is
Okay.
already there.
I just know that area has like light pollution problems resulting from the style of lighting, and I didn't know whether there was anything in this process that would allow us to talk about that.
It would
So-
be above and beyond what the code requires.
Okay,
If
all right.
if a majority of the commission wanted to, apply the glare prohibition across property lines, because that fixture probably, if it were on, I don't know if it works. but
Okay.
It hasn't been on since the building's been mostly vacant. but-
Okay.
But yeah, it's, there's a limit on the amount of light that can spill over on property lines. It's 0. So
Okay.
it basically, if a fixture is, not flat with the ground, then the likelihood that it spills over on property line is a little bit higher. So
Okay, thank you.
Is it fair to say existing existing code and requirements already address that?
Actually, what Mr. Moore explained was that because the parking lot is existing, then it's exempt from having to be corrected.
Ah, okay.
So if you wanted it corrected, then that would be going above and beyond what the code requires, but it's perfectly within your power to do that if you believe that it's within the scope of the conditional use. For example, if there's nuisances that are being created by the use, but that's existing, so you'd have to determine that there's something about this use that is causing that.
Okay. Ms. Webster?
Yes, I'm sorry, it might be in here, but can you clarify what the other spaces are? Who's in the other spaces in the building?
Sure. So it was explained in the applicant's application, I think it was Pivot Staffing was one of the tenants in Unit E, which would be at the back of the property. And I'm not entirely sure what that use is, if that's an office or what, but maybe the applicant could explain. And the building was previously occupied by RDI, which was a call center that took up, I believe they took up the entire building, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken.
They did.
So units A through D are currently vacant. That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question. There's a monument sign on Locust because it's a 5-unit parcel. Are there any considerations for that sign and the sign use? Because we have limitations on the number of signs and the square footage of signs. Is that part of anything we need to address, or is that codified?
There would be standards that we would fall back on if this board was not going to grant any additional waivers in terms of sign, the number of signs or the sign height or the sign width. It'd be a max of 6 feet if they were to replace the sign.
So, but with the existing sign, we're not worried, there's nothing we need to address if it's, a future tenant, it's up to them, the sign is there, we're okay, we don't have to.
Yeah, as far as if they wanted to distribute the copy area to have
Okay.
like multiple panels to show the various tenants that would occupy. So I guess it would be 3 potential
Okay.
tenants then.
Well, the reason I ask is I know different owners, different use, different tenants, but there's an increasing prevalence of, I found a concrete drill and let me put up a banner in the side of the wall. So I want to make sure that we're addressing the monument and, vinyl banners that people are installing on the sides of their buildings, which are super not compliant. So I just wanted to make sure we were addressing that part. Also, and again, this is just my lean methodology. Is there any concern, benefit, or thought on a condition for this? Just thinking of the interest of everyone's time and resources, where if they were to be successful and expand, or a tenant leaves and, adjacency, is there a way we can write a condition that allows staff to grant an expansion into A or E, as long as it's completely in line with what we approve now? So what I'm saying is, I don't necessarily think, if there's no grandiose change to the scope, the use, other things, it's just tenant A left and gee golly, we can get another escape room or something. Is there something we could write where that could be an administrative approval or something, as long as it's simply an expansion of the existing square footage and use? Does that make sense? I just don't want somebody to have to come back and be like, hey, same thing we're doing in B, C, and D, we'd like to do in A. Great.
Yeah, I don't think you would need to write that in, because something like that would be considered within scope. But if you want to make sure that it's not brought back, you could write that in.
So is our conditional use for the entire property or just those dedicated units?
I think it's for that property.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
then that works.
So, I
Okay.
mean, the term scope is broad enough that we could make that interpretation
Okay,
as needed. So, adding a proportional increase, and if it's not increasing the amount of parking or the amount of employees or hours of operation significant that would be noticed by the general public or the neighboring uses, then no, it wouldn't need to come back.
Okay, perfect. That was one of my concerns, because again, I just know that we're really trying to fill retail space, especially first floor retail space, and I don't want to have something where we come back and we're like, yeah, what's the difference? You added on 200 square feet, great. You know. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Moore? Mr. Cruz?
Yeah, one question. Looking at the proposal for the connection to the sidewalk, I'm looking at the site location plan currently, and it looks like there's kind of this, a little bit of an anomaly in terms of there's sort of a tree well between the two parking spots. I guess I'm just curious how, presumably those couple of spots would go away. And somehow, yeah, you would sort of work a sidewalk between those things. I sort of assumed that, you know, they saw that there's a 13 space requirement for this property, and presumably this would lose 2 spots. That would still be, that wouldn't impact, I think, the parking requirements negatively. There would still be adequate parking.
I think if we return to the slide that had the photos, I think that would help. It's a good question.
I do want to, I mean, I don't know if we can get into detail. I want to hear from the applicant, because I would hate to lose the tree in the process of getting the sidewalk, but I'm sure they're the designers, and I'm sure they have an answer for how to.
Yeah, so here is the curb. This is the edge of the walk that's in front of the building presently. And, yeah, so there would have to be a way that you would kind of meander around that tree so that you're not cutting straight through it. Yeah, I think that's worthy of discussion and asking the applicant their thoughts.
Any other questions for Mr. Moore? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Webb, how you doing?
There we go. All right, so as always, staff, Mr. Moore have done a nice job explaining what it is that we're doing here. I'm here tonight representing Jesse Baker and his family. Most of us have known Jesse for a long time. We've worked together on lots of projects over the years. He's, like a lot of people our age, starting to think about what his next plan might be. So looking at maybe swinging hammers a little less and doing something else a little more for the long term. So the idea here is kind of as Zach described, we're looking at doing kind of a fun sort of family event center here that includes the putt-putt and a little bit of a party room. Anyone who's raised or is currently raising kids knows how important little birthday parties are. So I'm going to make room for that in there, and then have 3 themed so pictures probably look familiar. I think maybe Zach used the ones that I provided. This was built in '93, as Zach pointed out. It was designed for 5 tenants. RDI had it for a long time. It was developed by Dennis Day and his family. They kind of did both of them together, both buildings together, sort of constructed them both. The parking doesn't truly share, but it's kind of grouped, so to speak. So while we're talking about it, this is the tenant area. As Zach pointed out, it's the 3 spaces in the middle. The dumpster enclosure maybe was always kind of intended. The biggest expense in doing that would have been to cut up the asphalt. I mean, the real maintenance thing with dumpsters are the trucks, and we have to have these big concrete aprons in front of it so that the scoops and everything doesn't just destroy the asphalt. Good news is for Jesse, that's already in place. Apparently that was required at the time, just not the screening from the public view. So the dumpster is sitting there. We're not going to lose any parking, not going to make any changes to meet that. And then as far as the sidewalk goes, as you guys pointed out, it's a little hard to see exactly where that tree is, but we're just trying to make a sidewalk to connect one sidewalk to another. If we can go around a tree, if the tree's in the way, I'm certain that staff can work with us on making sure we come up with a sidewalk that gets us from here to there and saves the tree. And the intention is certainly not to lose any parking in the process. We're hoping we're having these parking spaces are full all the time, so. So those are the two primary staff recommendations, which we're certainly in favor of. And then I just thought I'd take a minute, show you a little bit about what we're looking at doing here. So the name that they're working with right now is called Puzzles and Putt. And if any of you are familiar with Shark Tank, Jesse's working with this company called Thrill Builders that was on Shark Tank this year. It looks like they got about $300,000 from 3 of the sharks to help them in this business. Their website is up. They're growing really fast, so they're doing a lot of different things. These are kind of my interpretation, so to speak, of what the putt-putt might look like. But this kind of gives you an idea first on some of the escape rooms that they've done. The 3 themes that Jesse and his family have chosen are the Haunted Mansion, the Wizards of Wormley, and Bunker 57. Each one of these is a complete experience. So you'd have the variety of 3 different ones, and then Jesse, as I said, has been working with Thrill Builders and has found that over time they can, even though you don't have to completely gut and change the room, they can kind of reconfigure the clues, so people would hopefully have the opportunity to come back and see it another time and continue to try out the escape rooms. This is an idea of some of the putt-putt courses that they built. We're looking at just kind of a fun sort of typical obstacles. We have room for about 9 holes in there right now, and appreciate Corey's question about expansion. That's certainly on Jesse's mind now that we're in the middle. It seems like we got a chance to go one way or the other. Primarily to the left would be better if we're blocking off the escape rooms on the right-hand side. But yeah, one way or another, that's kind of how that works. So a couple things, also maybe kind of tying into Mr. Watt's point, there's no intention to sell alcohol here. This is not a bar. If there was an expansion and they changed and added food service or added alcohol or something, that obviously would bring us back here. But we appreciate if we're just expanding the family side of it, not necessarily coming back. They're really not doing any retail or marketing here. Hopefully they're going to do some branding, just T-shirts, kind of party favors, that kind of stuff, and kind of more family-oriented hours, sort of 11 to 11, 11 to 6 on Sundays. So just kind of proposing a simple family business here. Our zoning code for conditional uses talks about specific use concerns. Entertainment facilities is lumped in here with bowling alleys, skating rinks, racquetball courts, soccer fields, swimming pools. So it's obviously written for a little more serious scale of entertainment facility here. The concerns that it points out are traffic for large leagues and group events. Not sure we are going to have an escape room league just yet, but hopefully that will happen in the future. Most of the other regulations and specific use requirements have to do with adjacency to residential, which, as Zach pointed out in the zoning map, we're simply not anywhere near anything that way. With regard to lighting, signage, all those things, we really appreciate Mr. Moore kind of being proactive in helping us have an opportunity for a sign here, for sure. As he pointed out, it's kind of the only way signs have ever been on this building. So we'd certainly like to have one for this new venture. And then lastly, decision standards. I don't think we need to go through them item by item, but we believe that we meet the decision standards. We believe this is a good use for this vacant property. It's an opportunity for something that's not currently available, any sort of family entertainment, gaming possibilities, things like that. So we're hoping for your encouragement, and we'd like to see this move on to the next step. So happy to answer any questions. Jesse's here if you have any other specific use questions.
Any questions for Mr. Webb? Mr. Baker? Making his job too easy.
Well, I guess I would just question, and I don't think it's going to be a recommendation, but thinking about the lighting as just purely an improvement on the property, thinking about what an owner, if one wanted to have an attractive property that had lighting that added value to and it's not glare, I don't think it's gonna, but I think just plant the seed of if you had the opportunity to improve the lighting on the site as an owner, what that might be. But
Yeah.
that's just
Well, I mean, as I said, he's just a tenant in this building, and to.
Oh, okay, that's true.
To,
Okay.
to kind of saddle one out of 3 tenants with
Yeah,
fixing
okay,
a
yeah, that's true.
pre-existing
Okay, I get
problem
that.
is a little burdensome for
Okay, I
him,
know, I get
think,
it.
so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Webster?
So, again, as a tenant, you may have limitations, but is there any consideration of signage along Locust Street? Because that would be where people would see the sign.
Yeah, well, I think
most-
we had mentioned there is a yard sign out there currently that's not being used. So, you know, that's pre-existing, and presumably Jesse and the other tenants can get together with the new owner. These properties were all owned by Dennis Day for a long time. You know, we have a new owner that's purchased a number of his properties, including this one. He's working toward getting them filled and fixed up and things like that. So, that sign, I think, has really not been used for some time, but hopefully, with
I mean,
a
it
new
just seems
owner
like
and some
if
new
you wanna-
tenants, they'll.
You know, this is sort of off the agenda in a sense, but it just seems that, you know, it's a hard building to sign unless you could do something on Locust. It would be great, so just.
Yeah, I think the yard sign will be important, and, you know, we are kind of thinking of this as a destination business. I mean, it's maybe not something you know, would just walk down the street and decide to do. So it'll be kind of, the onus will be on the family to get some advertising, get on social media, get it out there. We feel like people will find it, you know, as long as we have good wayfinding. If they get to Locust Street and the name's on the ground sign, that we've almost got them at that point, so.
Yeah, be good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Webb? All right, thank you, sir. At this point, if there's anybody in the public who would like to speak to this matter, feel free to come up to the podium. All right. I have 2 smiles and 2 grins, so we're going to go with no. All right, I will accept the motion to adjourn from public session.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Webster with the second. All those in favor of?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, we are out of public. So, I'll open discussion. I think my opinion is we pretty much have the answers we want, but if there's any questions or anything that we feel needs to be addressed, I think this would be a good time to make sure everyone is on the same page, understands the conditions. We have all the conditions, so.
Yeah, I mean, 2 things I just would like to say thanks. I mean, this building, it was occupied by RDI, which was great, but it didn't add a lot to the district in terms of, you know, as a retail destination. So I'm super excited to see some tenants in here that will help enliven the Locust Street corridor. As, you know, it was great to have employment there, but it's gonna also be fun to have. And I know someone who works with students who come up with ideas. The idea of non-alcoholic entertainment there's an untapped demand in Oxford. So I think that they had a entrepreneurship, kind of like a Shark Tank kind of entrepreneurship thing this weekend. I had students reach out to me. What if we propose an indoor like driving range? You know, so I think this business is going to succeed. And I would also say that, you know, appreciation to the applicant, because this is probably the lowest level of entertainment that actually needs to go through the conditional use process. I mean, if this were a different kind of business, you wouldn't have to be here tonight, you wouldn't have to go before council, because of the nature of our code, you do. And I really, so from that point of view, I think we need to like put that in that context, which is if this were any number of other commercial uses, they would just be able to do it by right and not have to go through this. So I really
may have
appreciate.
asked Mr. Moore those questions,
Yeah,
too.
so I appreciate, I mean, I think that this is like, it just barely qualifies for being, you know, and it doesn't necessarily even, it's not gonna have the off-site impacts that, I see why we have entertainment in our code, because it could be a movie theater and that kind of stuff. This is gonna be pretty low impact. But I would say in general, like, I do appreciate if we have the opportunity, for example, to see the property improve through the conditional use process, to have that direct ADA connection, I think it will be good for you, and I think it'll be good for the city. I'm 100% convinced you can do it and work around the tree, right? I mean, there's like a leg that can go in there. You can preserve the parking spaces, you can preserve the tree. you have lawn area, you could do that. It just requires a little bit of a curve. So I see the light there just because I would love if over time we could move to a more attractive form of lighting than we have on that form of Locust Street. We have a lot of like floodlights like this in and around La Rosas, and it's not attractive for the corridor. But yeah, so that's, if you were to have the opportunity to work with your property owner at a time to move it in a direction that would be more attractive for your business and for the district, I would just encourage you to do that, but not anything that's a condition. So,
Those big lights are helpful on a foggy night, I'm just saying.
oh man, yeah, La Rosas, like you could land a spaceship there, like you could come
I
down.
don't think that's allowed in the new room.
So yeah, it's not the most attractive corridor, but so I think that those things that could be good for a business, attractive signage, would be good for the corridor, be good for the business, be good for Oxford. So yeah, I'm excited.
Any other thoughts? I was like, that's a weird way to raise your hand.
Oh, no.
No? All
I'm
right.
very supportive. I think
Yeah.
this is great for economic development and yay putt-putt.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm kind of getting the vibe somebody wants to make a motion to approve as presented by staff.
I move approval.
Seconded.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Oh, wow, I haven't done this in a while. Roll call.
Can do that. I'll start with Mr. Kruth.
In favor, yes.
Okay. And Ms. Webster,
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Arbuckle,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Watt.
Yes. All right. Normally 7-0 wins, so motion is approved. All right, with that, we are at my favorite part of the agenda, number 7. I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Seconded.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I'm not going to acknowledge opposition. We are adjourned.